Danielle Whitfield was 34 years old when a scheduling mix-up at the Averly estate sent her into the wrong ballroom. She'd only come to support a coworker's wedding, slipping into a back row seat, expecting to see Keisha in white. Instead, she saw a suit she'd picked out herself. Terrence told her Singapore, 6 weeks overseas, closing a joint venture that would set them up for life. He had no idea she was sitting 12 feet away, watching him say vows to a woman named Simone Carter. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He slid the ring onto her finger with the same steady hands that had promised Danielle a future just 3 nights ago on the phone. She didn't stand, didn't scream his name across the room. She sat perfectly still, memorizing every detail, the date, the officiant, the tearful mother by the guest book, while the man she loved married someone else and never once looked her way. What happened after that ceremony would unravel everything Terrence Boyd thought he'd built. But he wouldn't understand that until it was already too late. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The blueprints covered every inch of Danny's desk. She had spread them flat with her forearms, anchoring the curling corners with a coffee mug and a heavy metal stapler, and she was leaning over them the way a surgeon leans over an open chest, fully focused, nothing wasted. The overhead lights in the office had been dimmed to half power since 7. Everyone else had gone home. Danny hadn't noticed. Her red pen moved in small, precise strokes. A notation here, a correction there. The East Wing load calculations for the Meridian mixed-use development were close, very close, but the column spacing on the 3rd floor was still 2 centimeters off from what the soil report recommended, and 2 centimeters was the difference between a building that lasted and one that didn't. Danny knew that difference by heart. She had been building things in her mind since she was 9 years old, sketching bridges on the backs of church programs while her mother sat beside her in the pew, quiet and carefully still, the way Patrice Whitfield had learned to be in every room that belonged to someone else. Danny had watched her mother be careful and still for most of her life. She had decided, somewhere around age 12, that she would be neither. Now she was 34, a senior structural engineer at Callaway and Reed, and the Meridian pitch was hers to lead. Fully hers. The kind of project that put a name on a skyline. She was drawing a revised support arc when her phone buzzed against the desk. Terrence. She smiled before she even picked it up. That was still something. 3 years in, and his name on her screen still did that small, quiet thing to her chest. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hey you," she said. "Hey." His voice was warm, easy. Terrence always sounded like he had just woken up from a good dream. "Still at the office?" "Just finishing up." She straightened, rolling the tension out of her lower back. "How's Singapore?" "Hot." A short laugh. "Humid. Meetings ran long today, so I'm just getting back to the hotel." "You eat?" "Grab something." A pause, then, "You?" "I'll find something." She glanced at the cold coffee by her stapler. "The Meridian drawings are almost locked. I think Marcus is going to cry when he sees the revision." Terrence gave another low laugh, but it landed a half-second late, just slightly off, like an echo from a bad connection. Danny barely registered it. What she did register, without quite naming it, was the sound behind him. Not traffic, not a hotel lobby, something compressed and close, like a room with too many people in a small space, a particular kind of noise that buzzes just under conversation. She had been to Singapore twice for site consultations. She knew what the ambient sound sounded like from a hotel room on Orchard Road at night. This wasn't that. She turned back to the blueprints. "I'll let you go," she said. "You sound tired." "Little bit." His voice softened. "Miss you." "Miss you too." She meant it. "Get some sleep, Terrence." The call ended. She set the phone down and picked up her red pen. The notation she made on the drawing was precise and correct. Her hand was completely steady. She trusted him. 3 years was 3 years, and Terrence had never once given her a real reason to stop trusting him. A slightly strange background noise on a phone call was not a reason. It was an old building, or a bar across the street, or her own tired mind after 9 hours bent over a desk. She was not her mother. She would not manufacture ghosts. She was still at her desk 20 minutes later when Keisha knocked on the open office door. Keisha Reynolds was the kind of person who could make a construction site feel like a party. She was Danny's junior colleague by 5 years and her friend by genuine choice. Loud in the best way, with a talent for reading a room that Danny had always privately admired. Tonight, she had her coat already on, her bag on her shoulder, and a look on her face like she had been standing outside the door longer than she wanted to admit. "Tell me you're leaving soon," Keisha said. "Soon," Danny said. Keisha walked in anyway and perched on the edge of the chair across the desk. Her eyes dropped to the blueprints and then came back up with the particular patience she had developed specifically for Danny. "Saturday," Keisha said. "I know." "The Averly, 2 o'clock ceremony." Keisha tilted her head. "The venue you pushed through the renovation contract on, by the way. The one that would not exist in its current form without your column redesign." Danny looked up. "I know, Keisha." "I'm just saying," Keisha spread her hands. "You helped make that room beautiful. You should see it filled up." Her voice shifted slightly, going softer under the teasing. "And I'd really like you there, even just for a little while." Danny looked at her friend's face, the genuine want in it. "I've got a site visit in the morning," Danny said, "but I can swing by after. An hour, maybe?" Keisha's whole face opened up. "That's all I'm asking." After she left, Danny pulled up her phone calendar and typed in the address. The Averly Estate, Saturday, after site visit. She set a reminder and went back to her blueprints. The Averly Estate sat at the end of a long, oak-lined driveway, and even in the gray November light, it was something to look at. Danny had seen it in pieces, scaffolding and dust and exposed rebar. She had stood inside its gutted east wing for 3 hours one February morning, standing on raw concrete in a hard hat, explaining to the property manager exactly why the original column placement was going to get someone killed. She had been right, of course. She was usually right about buildings. Now the columns were correct. The east wing was beautiful, and she was pulling into the parking lot in her navy slacks and a cream blouse, already calculating how long she could stay before she needed to get back to Meridian. 1 hour, maybe less. She would find Keisha, tell her the room looked incredible, mean it, and leave before the dancing started. She locked her car and crossed the gravel lot toward the main entrance, heels crunching softly with each step. 2 large decorative chalkboards flanked the front doors in matching antique gold frames. Each one had been written in careful looping script. Reynolds Wedding, Grand Hall, East Wing. Carter Wedding, Magnolia Room, West Wing. Danny paused. She hadn't realized they were running 2 ceremonies at once. She had, technically, realized this months ago, a scheduling flag buried in the renovation wrap report that her firm submitted in August. Double booking risk. East and West halls share the main corridor and single-point entry. Recommend staggered arrival windows or dedicated exterior access for secondary event. The recommendation had been noted, acknowledged, and, apparently, ignored. That was between the estate and whoever booked the Carter wedding. Not her problem today. She pushed through the front door. The lobby was warm and full of gentle chaos. Guests in formal wear moved in 2 slow currents, splitting somewhere near the corridor junction, some drifting right and some drifting left. A string quartet somewhere to the east was already playing, the sound drifting down the hall in long, elegant ribbons. Someone's grandmother was being escorted on a young man's arm. A flower girl stood near a potted fern, very seriously adjusting her basket. A woman in a headset nearly walked directly into Danny. "Oh!" She caught herself, gripping a clipboard to her chest. Her eyes swept Danny up and down in the fast, professional way of someone with 17 things happening at once. Her headset cord dangled against her shoulder. Her lipstick was slightly uneven, like it had been reapplied in a moving car. "Carter or Reynolds?" Danny opened her mouth. "West Wing is right down here, the Magnolia Room. Just follow the orchids." The coordinator was already pointing left, with the full authority of someone who had no time for hesitation. "Ceremony started about 4 minutes ago. Please slip in quietly to the back. The doors are still open." And she was gone. Headset already active, walking fast, clipboard up. Danny stood there for a moment. She looked to the right, toward the east wing. toward the grand hall. She couldn't see anything from here. The string quartet sound was louder in that direction. She looked to the left. A trail of small white orchids in glass vases lined the baseboard of the west hallway, leading around a gentle curve toward the magnolia room. A set of tall double doors stood open at the far end. She could see the soft flickering of candles from where she was standing. 4 minutes in, she thought. I can slip into the back and look for Keisha. She followed the orchids. The magnolia room was full. Danny stepped inside as quietly as she could, letting her eyes adjust from the bright lobby to the warm, low light of a ceremony in progress. Rows of white-draped chairs stretched the length of the room on both sides of a cream-colored aisle runner. Flowers everywhere, blush and ivory, cascading from arrangements taller than most of the guests. Every seat was taken. 100 people, maybe more, all facing forward. She found a spot at the very back, along the wall, next to a standing arrangement of eucalyptus and rose. A quiet, unobtrusive place to stand and look for Keisha. She scanned the room, row by row, working forward, looking for the back of Keisha's head, for her mother, for anyone she recognized from the office. Nothing. She frowned. The wrong side of the room, maybe. She shifted slightly, trying to see around a tall man in the back left row. Still nothing familiar. No one she knew. The guests were all strangers. Her gaze drifted forward to the altar, the officiant, the candles, a cluster of bridesmaids in deep burgundy, and the groom, standing with his back mostly to the room, shoulders straight inside a dark charcoal suit with a faint blue thread running through the fabric. Danny's breath slowed. She knew that suit. She had stood inside a men's shop on Peachtree Street 14 months ago and held it up under the store lighting, checking the color against a fabric swatch in her hand, while the tailor made notes. She had told Terrence the blue thread was subtle enough for business, but warm enough for an event. He never wore it, she remembered thinking. He said he was saving it. The groom shifted, just slightly, turning his head at the sound of his bride's approach. His profile caught the candlelight. Her stomach dropped straight through the floor. It was Terrence. The room kept moving. The music kept playing. The world did not stop for Danny Whitfield. She made herself stay still. Every instinct she had screamed at her to move, to back through those double doors, to get out, to breathe somewhere that wasn't here. But her legs had locked, and some other part of her, the part that had spent 12 years solving problems that could not afford to be solved wrong, told her to stay quiet and watch. So she watched. Terrence was smiling, not the small, polite smile he wore at firm dinners or family functions. A real one, open and easy, aimed at someone walking toward him down that cream-colored aisle. Danny didn't look at him again after that. She made herself look at the bride instead. She was young, late 20s maybe, beautiful in the way of someone who had planned to be beautiful. Every detail considered, nothing accidental. Her dress was fitted through the bodice and flared just below the hip, ivory with a faint shimmer under the candlelight. Her hair was pulled back into a low, smooth style, with a few soft pieces falling around her face. She walked with her chin up, composed, the kind of compose that took practice. She was looking at Terrence like he was everything she'd been working toward. The officiant's voice carried easily through the room. Marriage is not simply a contract between two people. It is a declaration, a covenant, a commitment made in full sight of those who love you most. Danny's jaw tightened. Near the front right row, a woman in a champagne mother-of-the-bride dress pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. She was round-faced and warm-looking, her eyes wet and bright. Her whole body leaned forward slightly, like she was trying to get closer to the moment. An usher stood nearby, ready to catch her if the emotion got to be too much. She looked like a woman watching the best thing she had ever done walk to the altar. Danny looked back at the front. The vows were the personal kind. Terrence went first. Simone. He took her hands. His voice was steady, calm and low and sure. I have been waiting my whole life to build something worth keeping. And every time I tried to figure out what that looked like, he paused, the way people pause when they've rehearsed a pause. It looked like you. A soft sound moved through the crowd. The woman in champagne pressed the handkerchief harder against her lips. Danny didn't move. She breathed through her nose, slowly, and kept her face neutral. Simone's vows were shorter, confident. She didn't look down at notes. She spoke like a woman who said exactly what she meant and expected it to land. The rings were exchanged. Simple, clean. Terrence slid the band onto Simone's finger without fumbling, and she smiled. Small and sure, not for the crop, just for him. The officiant said the words. Terrence kissed his wife. The room erupted into applause. The recessional music started, bright and swelling, and the crowd rose around Danny in a single movement, everyone clapping, everyone turning to watch the couple walk back up the aisle. It was loud suddenly, bodies shifting, people reaching for each other. Danny moved, not toward the doors, not yet. She slipped sideways along the back wall, using the standing crowd as cover, moving toward the far corner near the entrance, where a narrow table had been set up beside the guest book. White tablecloth, a pen in a small glass holder, a framed card that read, "Please sign and celebrate with us." And beside the guest book, half open, held flat by a small ribbon-tied weight on each corner, the marriage license. She stopped in front of it. The room was still moving, still clapping, still full of sound. No one was looking at the corner table. Everyone was watching Terrence and Simone walk up the aisle. Danny pulled her phone from her bag. Her hands were very steady. She was aware of that, aware that she was not shaking yet, that something in her had gone cold and precise. She photographed the license. 2 shots, close, making sure the names were readable. Terrence Allen Boyd. Simone Renee Carter. The date. The county seal. The officiant's signature line, still blank, waiting to be signed at the reception. She put her phone back in her bag. Then she walked out. The parking lot air hit her like a wall, cold and sharp and too bright after the warm candlelight. Her heels crunched across the gravel. She found her car, unlocked it, got inside and closed the door. She sat there. Her hands, steady through all of it, were shaking now. A fine, constant tremor she couldn't stop. She pressed them flat against her thighs and stared through the windshield at the row of parked cars in front of her. She did not call Terrence. She pulled up a name in her contacts and pressed call. It rang twice. "Danny, what's up?" "I need a lawyer who hates weddings as much as I do right now." Her voice came out level, almost flat. "I just watched my boyfriend get married." A long silence on the other end. "Ronnie," she said, "you still there?" "Yeah." His voice had changed, quiet now, careful. "I'm here. Talk to me." The diner was called Milo's. It had been there since before either of them was born. A narrow place on Clement Street with vinyl booths, fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, and coffee that came in a white ceramic mug whether you wanted it or not. Danny and Ronnie had been coming here since college. It smelled like bacon grease and dish soap, and on a Sunday morning, it was just busy enough that nobody paid attention to anybody else. Danny got there first. She chose the booth in the back corner, the one with a clear view of the door. Old habit. She had slept maybe 2 hours. She didn't look it. She'd made sure of that. Her hair was combed. Her clothes were clean. She sat with her hands wrapped around her mug, back straight, and watched the door until Ronnie pushed through it. He spotted her immediately. He was tall, Ronnie, with a wide build and a face that usually carried something easy and unhurried. Not today. He walked the length of the diner without stopping to look around, slid into the seat across from her, and put his laptop bag on the bench beside him. He looked at her for a moment. Just looked. "You eat anything?" he said. "No." "You sleep?" "Some." He picked up the laminated menu, even though he'd had the same thing here for 15 years. It was something to do with his hands. "Okay," he said. "Show me." Danny unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. Ronnie looked at the photo. He zoomed in with 2 fingers. He looked for a long time without speaking. The license was clear, the names sharp. Terrence Allen Boyd, Simone Renee Carter. the date printed cleanly across the top. He set the phone down. 2 shots. I wanted to make sure the names were readable. He nodded slowly. Good. The waitress came. They both ordered without looking up. When she left, Ronnie reached into his bag and pulled out his laptop. Give me a few minutes, he said. Danny wrapped both hands back around her mug and watched the street through the window beside them. A man walked by with a small dog. A woman pushed a stroller. The morning was gray and ordinary, moving along without any awareness of what had happened yesterday, which somehow made it worse. Danny. She looked back at the table. Ronnie had turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a public records page, a marriage license application. She could see the file date clearly, a timestamp in the upper right corner, the kind a county clerk's office generates automatically when the paperwork comes in. 14 months ago. She stared at it. Her brain ran the numbers the way it always did, fast and automatic, before she could stop it. 14 months ago. She and Terrence had moved in together 14 months and 3 weeks ago. The weekend they moved in, he had carried boxes up 2 flights of stairs and made her laugh by pretending to throw his back out on the smallest one. She had cooked dinner that night, a real dinner, not takeout. It had felt like a beginning. It was the same month he filed to marry someone else. She didn't say anything for a moment. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. The engagement wasn't recent, she said. Her voice came out quiet and even. No. Ronnie closed the laptop halfway. This wasn't a mistake, Danny. This wasn't him panicking and making a bad decision. He started this the same week you two started building something together. That's... He stopped, pressed his mouth flat. That's not a lapse. It's a design, she said. He looked at her. Yeah, it is. The food came. Neither of them touched it right away. Danny stared at the laptop, then at her coffee, then at nothing in particular. The thing she kept coming back to wasn't the anger. She could feel the anger sitting deep and low in her chest like a lit coal, patient and hot. But the shape of it, the precision. He hadn't drifted. He hadn't gotten confused or weak or caught up in something he didn't plan. He had built 2 lives side by side, and he had known exactly what he was doing the entire time. She had been part of the plan, not a complication in it. Don't call him, Ronnie said. I know that's what you want to do. It's not, actually. He raised an eyebrow. I want to know everything first, she said. All of it, before I do anything. She looked at him steadily. That's why I called you and not him. Something in Ronnie's expression settled. Okay. He opened the laptop again. Then here's what we do. I keep pulling records, financials, property filings, anything public that touches his name. You go home, you act normal. He gets back in 2 days, you treat it like any other Tuesday. And I don't tip him off. Not even a little, Ronnie said. Right now, the most dangerous thing you have is that he has no idea you were in that room. Danny picked up her fork. She ate a few bites, not because she was hungry, but because she needed her body to function. Document everything, she said. Everything, he agreed. She drove home that evening in the dark, the city moving past her windows in streaks of orange and white. She replayed conversations in her head, not to feel them, but to study them. The way Terrence said her name, the particular warmth he put into his voice when he was managing her mood without her noticing. She catalogued his habits, his patterns, the excuses she had accepted without examining. She practiced what her face would look like when he walked through the door in 2 days. Neutral, warm enough, normal. She had built her entire career on staying composed under pressure, on never letting a flaw in the structure show until she was ready to address it on her own terms. She could do this. She parked, went upstairs, and locked the door behind her. He came back on a Tuesday. Danny heard his key in the lock at 6:30. She was in the kitchen, standing at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta she had zero appetite for. She had been stirring it for 10 minutes. The water had long gone cold. She heard the door swing open, the familiar drag of his roller bag across the entryway tile. "Hey." His voice was warm and easy, like a man walking into a room that had been waiting for him. "Smells good in here." She turned around. He looked rested. That was the first thing she noticed. 6 weeks abroad, allegedly, and he looked like a man back from a vacation. His skin was clear. His eyes were bright. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and pulled her into a hug, pressing his lips to her temple, squeezing her shoulders the way he always did, the particular grip she had once found familiar and safe. She hugged him back. Same pressure, same duration. "I missed you," he said into her hair. "I missed you too," she said. Every word tasted like chalk. He stepped back and looked at her, grinning. "You have no idea the week I had. Customs held up the hardware shipment for 3 days. 3 days, Danny. And the project manager on the Singapore side spoke maybe 40 words of English, which, fine, you adapt. But then the structural report came back with flagged load tolerances on the east elevation, and I'm thinking, I'm literally standing in front of a senior structural engineer every night for 3 years, and some of that should have transferred over." He laughed at his own joke. She smiled at hers. "Go shower," she said, turning back to the stove. "I'll finish up in here." "Yes, ma'am." He kissed the back of her neck and wheeled his bag toward the bedroom. She waited until she heard the bathroom door close. The pipes in the wall clicked and groaned as the water came on. She moved to the kitchen table where her laptop was already open. The account was called Boyd Whitfield Capital Reserve. Terrence had set it up 2 years ago, sitting across from her at that same table, walking her through the terms with the patient, thorough energy of a man who wanted her to feel included. "It's ours," he had said, "for the future. A development fund we build together." She had transferred in money every month since. A responsible amount. An amount that reflected how seriously she took the relationship. She logged in. The balance had changed. Significantly. She had not checked it in 4 months. She trusted it the way you trust a joint account when someone has given you every reason to. She wished, briefly and uselessly, that she had checked it sooner. There were 9 outgoing transfers in the last 14 months, each one sizable, each one labeled the same way. Transfer, BG Capital Development, LLC. She pulled up a new tab and typed the LLC name into the State Business Registry. BG Capital Development, LLC. Managing Member, Gregory A. Boyd. Gregory Boyd, Terrence's father. She sat back in her chair. There was a project, she knew of it distantly from things Terrence had mentioned in passing, a mixed-use development in the East Bay. He had described it as something he and his father were exploring together, something early stage, nothing to worry about yet. He had never once mentioned that the seed money was coming from this account. He had never once mentioned that she was helping fund it. She went back to the transfers and added them up. The number she arrived at was the kind that made her throat tighten. Not because it was more than she could absorb. She was careful with money, had always been careful, but because of what that number had bought. She thought about Simone Carter in that white dress, the venue, the flowers, the room full of people, the cake, the photographer circling the dance floor, the whole perfect, expensive machinery of that day. Her money had helped build that. She had helped build that. She stared at the screen for a moment, completely still. The shower was still running. Steam would be fogging up the bathroom mirror. Terrence would be in there right now, rinsing off whatever the last 2 weeks had actually been, preparing to come back out and sit down to dinner and talk to her about Singapore. She closed the laptop. She stood up and went back to the stove. She turned the burner on. She reheated the pasta, drained it, plated it, moved through every step the way she would on any other Tuesday evening. She heard the shower cut off. By the time Terrence came out in a clean shirt and bare feet, his hair still damp, she had 2 plates on the table and her hands folded in her lap. "That looks great," he said, dropping into his chair and picking up his fork. "Simple stuff." She picked up her fork, too. He started talking about Singapore again. A story this time, something about a restaurant on the waterfront and a misunderstanding with the bill. He told it well. She listened and nodded at the right moments and laughed at the right place. She ate every bite on her plate. The coffee shop Ronnie picked was in a neighborhood neither of them worked in. That was intentional. It was a small place, the kind with mismatched chairs and exposed brick, and a chalkboard menu written in two different people's handwriting. Tuesday morning, half empty. Nobody from Danny's office, nobody from Simone's. Danny arrived first and took a corner table with her back to the wall. She ordered a black coffee she didn't plan to drink and set her phone face down on the table. She had dressed plainly on purpose. Dark jeans, a gray blazer, nothing memorable. Ronnie had described the contact only as a woman named Claudette, who had worked at Simone's event planning firm for 3 years and recently given notice. Someone with no loyalty left to protect and a long memory. Ronnie had a way of finding people like that. He said it was part of being a real estate attorney. Danny suspected it was just part of being Ronnie. Claudette arrived at 9:10. She was a compact woman in her late 30s, natural hair pulled back, wearing a yellow blouse that was too cheerful for what she was clearly about to say. She scanned the room with the practiced speed of someone used to managing event day chaos, spotted Danny, and crossed to the table without hesitating. "You're Danielle," she said, not a question. "Danny," she gestured to the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." Claudette sat down, ordered a tea from the passing server, and folded her hands on the table. She looked at Danny steadily for a moment, the way someone looks at a person they've already decided to be honest with. "Ronnie said you need the full version," Claudette said, "not the softened version." "I do," Claudette nodded. 8 months before the wedding, she said, Simone came into work on a Monday and she was off. Quiet in a way that wasn't normal for her. I've worked with Simone long enough to know what her moods look like, and that one was specific. It was the mood she gets when she's decided something and she doesn't want to talk about it. Danny kept her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. She said nothing. I asked her about it at lunch. She brushed it off at first. Claudette paused. Then she told me she had found messages on Terrence's phone, from another woman. She didn't say your name then, but she described them and they were, she said, suggestive. Her word. She said she confronted him about it the same night. The coffee cup was warm. Danny focused on that. "What did he tell her?" she asked. "That you were an ex." Claudette said it simply, no cushion. "That you two had dated seriously a while back and that you never really accepted that it was over. He told her you reached out periodically, that he'd been too nice about it, too slow to cut things off. He used the word unstable." She paused. More than once, the way Simone told it. Danny felt something move through her chest. Not surprise, something older and quieter than surprise. Unstable. She thought about her life, the blueprints she reviewed at midnight, the methodical way she rebuilt herself after every setback. The 3 years she had spent showing up, being steady, being exactly the kind of person who does not fall apart. And Terrence had taken all of that, her whole careful, constructed life, and handed it to Simone as evidence of damage. Did Simone believe him? Danny asked. Claudette was quiet for a beat. "She believed enough," she said. "That's what I kept thinking afterward. She didn't fully believe him because if she had, she wouldn't have still been off that whole week. But she also didn't push it, didn't ask to see his phone again, didn't ask for your last name, didn't ask how recent it actually was." She wrapped both hands around her tea mug. She made a decision about how much she wanted to know. "Because of the wedding," Danny said. "Because of the wedding," Claudette confirmed, "and the Boyd name, and the client base she'd been building toward for 2 years. Simone is very good at her job. She was very clear-eyed about what marrying into that family would do for her firm." She looked at Danny directly. She wasn't going to blow that up over something she couldn't prove, and decided she didn't want to prove. The coffee shop hummed around them. Someone at the counter laughed at something. A chair scraped the floor. Danny sat with it. All the times she had imagined Simone as simply another woman who had been lied to, a parallel victim, someone who deserved at least the partial sympathy of not having known. She had constructed that version because it was tidier, because it made her own position cleaner. That version was gone now. Simone had held the thread. She had felt its pull. She had set it down deliberately and walked away, because the alternative cost too much. And Danny had been left holding a name, unstable, that she had never been given the chance to answer. She picked up her coffee and drank. It had gone cold. "Thank you," she said, setting the cup down. "I mean that." Claudette studied her face. "You're not what he described," she said quietly. Danny picked up her bag and stood. "No," she said. "I'm not." Danny made Terrence's favorite breakfast on Thursday morning: scrambled eggs with sharp cheddar, turkey bacon, toast with the crusts cut off, the way he'd mentioned once 2 years ago, and never had to mention again because she had simply remembered. She set it on the table before he was fully awake, poured his coffee without being asked, and sat across from him with her own mug, watching him eat and listening to him talk about nothing. He was good at talking about nothing. She had always admired that about him, in the way you admire a skill you don't possess yourself. Terrence could fill a room with comfortable sound, easy words, easy laughter, the kind of warmth that made people feel chosen. It had worked on her for 3 years. It was still working on him right now, she realized. He believed it. He sat across from her with scrambled eggs and a fabricated story about Singapore traffic, and he believed every second of it was fine. She smiled at the right moments, asked a follow-up question when the silence stretched, passed him the hot sauce. She had learned patience from her mother, though not the kind Patrice intended to teach. The following Tuesday, Ronnie texted her a single line. "Yvonne Carter. Coffee. Thursday. Neutral ground." She typed back, "I'll be there." Yvonne Carter was a woman who had clearly passed her cheekbones and her posture directly to her daughter. She was 58 but moved like someone younger, with the particular energy of a woman who had spent decades making other people comfortable and had come to genuinely enjoy it. She shook Danny's hand warmly, ordered a caramel latte without looking at the menu, and began talking before her coat was fully off. Ronnie had introduced them as professional contacts, a mutual connection in property development. Yvonne, it turned out, needed no prompting to fill in the gaps herself. "Simone's always had a head for business," Yvonne said, settling into her chair. Even planning this wedding, she treated it like a project. Every vendor, every timeline. She laughed softly, a mother's laugh, full of uncomplicated pride. "That's how I knew the deposit was safe to cover. Because Simone had already mapped out how the Boyd project would bring it all back. She called it an investment in their future." Ronnie nodded, his face perfectly pleasant. "Smart approach," he said. "Which venue, if you don't mind my asking?" "I do a fair amount of work with event properties." "The Averley Estate." Yvonne wrapped both hands around her latte. "Beautiful space. The renovation they'd done was just stunning. I wired the deposit myself, the full amount, because Terrence said the joint venture funds were temporarily tied up in a contract review." She waved a hand. He was very thorough about explaining it, very professional. I felt completely at ease. Danny held her coffee cup in both hands and said nothing. Temporarily tied up. She knew exactly where those funds had been. She had seen the transfer records herself. She had watched Terrence's careful accounting from a joint account she had contributed to for 2 years, routed cleanly into a development project that now bore Gregory Boyd's name and Simone Carter Boyd's hopeful fingerprints. Yvonne had wired her own money into a hole Terrence had already dug. She just didn't know it yet. "Sounds like he had everything well organized," Danny said. Yvonne smiled. "That's exactly the right word for him," she said. "Organized." Ronnie called her that evening while she was parked outside her apartment, too tired to go in yet. "Gregory Boyd's associates," he said without preamble. "2 of them have started asking quiet questions. Not loud questions, not legal action yet. But I've flagged the irregular transfers in a way that was hard to ignore, and it's moving." He paused. "Gregory is going to figure out his capital is entangled before this is over." "Good," Danny said. "There's one more thing." His voice shifted just slightly. "My source near the Boyd office says Terrence has been telling his father a story about you, about why things have been strained, is how he put it." She already knew, the way you know when you feel weather changing before it rains. "What story?" she asked anyway. "That you got too focused on your career to build a family." Ronnie said it carefully, like he was handling something sharp. "That he wanted a partner who was present, that your ambition made you unavailable. She stared at the steering wheel for a long moment, the blueprints reviewed at midnight, the structural calculations redone twice to make sure they were right, the career she had built with both hands because she had watched her mother make herself small and had sworn, quietly and completely, that she never would. Terrence had taken that, her best quality, the thing she had fought hardest to build, and he had handed it to his father as a reason. "Danny," Ronnie said, "you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice was steady. "I want to propose a dinner at the Boyd house. Terrence, Gregory, his mother, you, my mother. I want everyone in the same room." A pause. "When?" "Saturday. I'll tell him I want to talk about our future." "He'll say yes," Ronnie said quietly. "He thinks he's managing you." "I know," Danny said. She got out of the car and went inside. She asked Terrence that night over dinner, keeping her voice soft and her eyes sincere. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about where things are going." She let a small pause sit there. "I want to have dinner with your family, all of us together. I think it's time we talked about the future." Terrence looked at her across the table. Something moved briefly in his expression, a flicker of calculation dressed as warmth, and then the smile came, easy and practiced. "Yeah," he said, "I think that's a great idea." He reached across and squeezed her hand. "Saturday work?" "Saturday's perfect," she said. The Boyd house smelled like cedar and furniture polish. It was a big house, quiet in the way that expensive houses are quiet, like the walls themselves had been bought to keep noise out. The kind of home that communicated success without trying, with its dark wood floors and framed photos arranged just so on the credenza in the front hall. Danny had been here 4 times before. Tonight felt nothing like those times. She arrived at 6:15. Gregory Boyd met her at the door, tall, silver-templed, wearing the careful cordiality he extended to everyone until he had reason not to. He shook her hand the way he always did, firm, brief, the handshake of a man who measured people in the first 3 seconds. "Danielle," he said, "come in." Ronnie was already in the sitting room, a glass of water untouched on the table beside him. He was wearing the dark blazer he kept for serious occasions, and had the particular stillness of a man who had read every document in the folder he'd set down at his feet. He gave Danny one look when she entered, a small nod, nothing more, and she felt something settle in her chest. Her mother, Patrice, sat in the armchair nearest the window. 61 years old, hands folded in her lap, wearing the expression she wore when she was frightened but had decided not to show it. She had not wanted to come. She had called Danny twice that week. "Let it go quietly, baby. Don't embarrass yourself." Danny had listened, and then she had said, "I need you there, Mama. Not to fight, just to be a witness." Patrice had come. Terrence arrived at 6:30, exactly on time, in a charcoal shirt and easy confidence. He walked in the way he always walked into rooms he thought he owned, shoulders back, smile ready, a man who expected to be received well. He kissed his father on the shoulder in greeting. He touched Danny's arm lightly and said, "Hey, you," with warmth so practiced it had probably stopped feeling like a performance years ago. He did not register the folder on the table. Not yet. They moved to the dining room. Gregory sat at the head. Terrence took his usual seat to the left. Danny sat directly across from him, Ronnie beside her, Patrice at the far end. A housekeeper had left water and a bread basket that no one touched. Terrence looked around the table with a small, pleasant frown, the look of a man beginning to recalculate, slowly, what kind of dinner this was. Danny did not make him wonder for long. She reached into the folder and set the first document on the table. She placed it calmly, flat, the way you set down a blueprint. "The marriage license," she said. "Terrence Aidan Boyd and Simone Carter, filed 14 months ago." She let that land. "You moved in with me 14 months ago." Terrence's face went very still. "Danny." She set down the second document. "Joint account statements. 2 years of transfers routed into the Meridian Place development project." She looked at Gregory when she said the next part. Registered under your name, Gregory. Funded, in part, by money I contributed to what Terrence told me was our future. Gregory looked at the page. Then he looked at his son. Terrence opened his mouth. That account was a shared investment. She had full access to money she put in, Ronnie said. His voice was even. What she didn't have was knowledge of where it went. We have the transfer records, timestamps, account numbers. It's all there. Terrence turned to his father and the smile came back. Smaller now, working harder. Dad, this is being framed in a way that… The engagement began when we moved in together, Danny said again. Not loudly. She kept her voice the same temperature throughout. Not before, not after. You were building a life with me while you were planning a wedding with someone else, and you used the account you told me was for us to pay for it. Patrice made a small sound from the far end of the table and pressed her fingers to her mouth. Gregory had not moved. His eyes were on the transfer records, moving slowly across the columns of numbers with the focus of a man who had made his living reading exactly this kind of document. Terrence, he said. Just the name, nothing else. I can explain the timing. The Yvonne Carter deposit, Ronnie said, placing the final document down. The wedding venue. Simone's mother wired the full amount, believing it was a bridge for the joint venture's temporarily frozen funds. Those funds weren't frozen. They were here. He tapped the transfer records. Gregory, 2 of your business partners have already started asking questions about the irregular routing. You have time to get ahead of this. Not much, but some. Gregory Boyd sat back slowly in his chair. He looked at the documents. He looked at his son.
The easy confidence had left Terrence's face entirely. What remained underneath was younger looking, smaller, a man stripped of the performance. Dad, get out of my house. Gregory's voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't need volume. I need to understand how deep this goes before I decide anything further. He did not look up from the table. Get out. Gregory Boyd made the call at 9 the next morning. Terrence found out through his project manager, who sent a 2-sentence email. Gregory Boyd has formally withdrawn from the Meridian Place development. All access credentials have been revoked as of today. That was it. No call, no explanation, just the door, closed. Danny was at her desk when Ronnie texted her the confirmation. It's done. Gregory filed the withdrawal this morning. His attorney contacted the title company an hour ago. She read the message twice. Then she set her phone face down on the desk and went back to her blueprints. Her hands were steady. She had expected this. She had planned for this. Still, something moved through her chest when she read it. Not satisfaction exactly. Something quieter. Something closer to relief. She had one more meeting to get through. Ronnie had arranged it through a mutual professional contact. A coffee shop on the east side of the city. Neutral ground. Public enough to be safe. Quiet enough to matter. Simone Carter arrived 3 minutes after Danny, still wearing her newlywed posture. Composed, put together, the kind of poise that came from being very good at controlling rooms. She sat down across from Danny with the careful expression of a woman who had decided on her approach during the drive over. Measured. Slightly cold. The expression of someone who had already written the other person as a problem to be managed. I agreed to this meeting as a courtesy, Simone said. So. I appreciate it. Danny slid the folder across the table. I won't take much of your time. Simone looked at the folder without touching it. The first page is the joint account timeline, Danny said. Money I contributed to what Terrence told me was our shared investment. The second page shows where it went. You'll recognize the Meridian Place project. He told you that was something you two built together. Simone's jaw tightened, barely. The third page, Danny continued, is the one I want you to look at most carefully. Simone opened the folder then, slowly,
The way people open things they already know will cost them. The third page was a printed summary Ronnie had prepared. Clean, dated, factual. A timeline of text message activity, second-hand account on record, and one key date circled in ink. 8 months before the wedding. Simone stared at it. "You found my messages on his phone," Danny said. "He told you I was an ex who couldn't let go, that I was unstable. You decided to believe him." She paused. "I'm not angry about what Terrence told you. He lied to me too. I'm here because you had a name, a number, and a reason to look. And you didn't look, because looking would have cost you something." Simone's eyes came up from the page. There was something in them now that hadn't been there before. Not guilt, exactly, but the particular discomfort of a person watching their own reasoning laid out in daylight. "You don't know what I was recast as a villain," Danny said. Her voice didn't rise. "By a woman who had every reason to know better. That's all I came to say. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, and I wanted you to see the documentation so there's no version of this where you tell yourself you didn't know what you were choosing." Simone looked back down at the page. She didn't speak. Danny closed the folder and stood. "I hope it was worth it." She left her coffee untouched. Simone came home to their apartment that evening and found Terrence in the kitchen, moving through the space with the practiced ease of someone who didn't yet know the floor had already given way beneath him. She set the folder on the counter between them. She didn't yell. The account from a close friend who was there described it as the opposite of yelling. Two people talking in the flat, hollow tones of something already decided. By the end of the week, Terrence had moved his things into a hotel. By the following Monday, Simone's attorney had made the first call. The people at the dinner table that Saturday night were not the kind who made posts or sent anonymous messages. They were the kind who met for lunch and said things plainly. Gregory Boyd told his attorney, who told 2 business partners. He told them because the fund transfers were already a matter of record, and he preferred they hear the shape of it from him, clearly and completely, before they heard pieces of it from somewhere else. Ronnie mentioned it in passing to 2 colleagues in the same real estate law circle where Terrence had spent years building his professional name. He didn't editorialize. He cited documents. Patrice Whitfield, who had told her daughter twice to let it go quietly, said nothing publicly. But she called her oldest friend, and her oldest friend knew Yvonne Carter from church. Yvonne Carter learned the full timeline on a Tuesday. She learned that her daughter had known about Danny 8 months before the wedding. She learned that the venue deposit she wired, the one Simone told her was just a temporary bridge, had filled a gap Terrence's fraud created. She did not call Simone that day. She needed time before she could. The building had a name now, the Whitfield Morrow Center for Mixed-Use Development. 12 stories, retail on the ground floor, office space above, 40 units of affordable housing starting on the 8th floor. The kind of project that looked ambitious on paper and looked even better in steel and glass. Danny stood on the sidewalk in front of it on a cold Thursday morning in March, wearing a hard hat over her good coat, holding a pair of ceremonial scissors that felt ridiculous and right at the same time. There were maybe 60 people gathered, colleagues from her firm, 2 city council members, representatives from the community housing board that had helped fund the residential floors, a few journalists, people who had watched the project change hands over the last 6 months and had followed it to this moment. Ronnie stood to her left, hands in his coat pockets, watching the crowd with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done a lot of work and was content to let someone else hold the scissors. "You're going to cry," he said, not looking at her. "I'm not," she said. "Your voice already sounds like you're about to cry." "Ronnie." "I'm just saying." She turned and looked at him. He was smiling, small and genuine, the way he smiled when he was proud of something and didn't want to make it a big thing. She had known that smile for 11 years. She trusted it the way she trusted load-bearing walls, completely, without having to think about it.
"Thank you," she said.
Just that. He knew what she meant. He nodded once. "Don't thank me. Go cut the ribbon." 6 months ago, this building had been registered under Gregory Boyd's name, its capital sourced from a joint account Danny had contributed to for 2 years, its future tied to a man who had built his entire plan on the assumption that she would never look closely enough to see it. He had been wrong about that. After Gregory froze Terrence out of the deal, the project had stalled for 3 weeks while attorneys sorted through the tangled finances. Danny had used those 3 weeks to put together a new funding proposal, working 18-hour days, pulling in 2 community development lenders and a city infrastructure grant she had been tracking for months. She presented the proposal to the city board on a Wednesday. They approved it on a Friday. She had taken on the project lead herself. Her firm had supported it. The building that once bore Terrence's fingerprints now bore her name on the permit, the title, and the cornerstone. Terrence Boyd was not present. He was not in a position to be present at much anymore. The fraud exposure, quiet but thorough, spread through professional circles by people who cited documents rather than rumors, had done its work. 2 development partners had declined to renew agreements with him. A third had quietly pulled a letter of intent. His professional network had not collapsed dramatically, it had simply stopped returning calls. Gregory had covered his own legal exposure through his attorneys, and had done so efficiently. He had not, as far as anyone could tell, spoken to his son since the night of the dinner. Terrence was, from what Ronnie heard through the real estate law circle, liquidating assets and looking at opportunities in a smaller market 2 states away. Starting smaller. Starting over, in a quieter city where his name didn't carry the weight it once had, and the weight it had lost. Simone Carter had not lost everything at once. It had come apart the way overbuilt structures sometimes did, not a collapse, but a slow failure at the joints. The event planning clients had been first, not a mass departure, just a gradual thinning of referrals from the social circle that had watched the documented truth pass from person to person over coffee and at lunches, and through the same church network where Yvonne Carter had learned the full timeline on a Tuesday. Then Yvonne herself. They were still speaking, they were mother and daughter, and that didn't end, but something had changed in how Yvonne looked at Simone. A careful distance where there had once been easy warmth. Yvonne had not forgotten that her daughter had known about Danny and had said nothing. Had not forgotten the venue deposit wired in good faith into a gap she was never supposed to see. Simone still had her business, she still had her skill, but the marriage was gone. The Boyd family name was gone, and the version of herself she had chosen when she decided not to look, that was gone too. She was left with what remained after ambition and convenient truth had both been stripped away, and she was having to figure out what that amounted to. Patrice Whitfield stood near the back of the crowd, a little apart from the others, watching her daughter at the ribbon. She did not say anything to the people around her. She just watched. She had told Danny twice to let it go quietly. She understood now, more than she had then, exactly what she had been asking her daughter to do. She had been asking her to do what Patrice herself had done for 30 years. Swallow it, shrink it, find a way to live small around the wound. Danny had refused. Patrice had spent the last 6 months thinking about that, turning it over, looking at her own history the way you looked at old blueprints, checking for the place where the load had been misread. She was still thinking about it. She did not have a plan, and she was not sure she needed one yet. But something had shifted, something quiet and stubborn and hers. She watched her daughter walk to the ribbon. The scissors were cold through Danny's gloves. She looked up at the building one more time before she cut it. 12 floors of steel and glass and real, finished work. Her name on the cornerstone, no one else's. She thought, briefly, about the parking lot at the Averley estate. Hands shaking, a photograph on her phone. A call to Ronnie she had almost not made because some part of her had wanted to simply go home and pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. She was glad she had made the call. She pressed the blades together. The ribbon fell in 2 clean pieces. The crowd clapped, and someone cheered, and the cold March air moved through the street between the buildings, and Danny Whitfield stood in the middle of it, steady, warm, and finally, completely free. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!